Hello and welcome to Friday Live. I am Amanda Farmer and we are going out live to the Your Strata Property Facebook page, also over to LinkedIn and to YouTube as well. How has your week in Strata been? What have you all been up to this week? Today, I have been recording some podcast episodes for you all, some fantastic interviews that I am really looking forward to bringing to you very soon. Got some great guests, got some great topics coming up, and I'm feeling excited about that. So, that was a lot of my day today. I was also doing some legal work today, putting together some evidence for our New South Wales Tribunal, where I'm acting for an owners corporation defending an application for a compulsory appointment. I don't act for a lot of owners corporations, buildings these days. Most of my work is acting for lot owners, so unusual to be on the other side, but a long-standing owners corporation client there. I do still do legal work. Some people do ask me, they say, Amanda, you have the podcast, you have the membership community, you have all of your online education. Do you still practice law? Do you still serve clients doing billable hours and legal work? And I say, yes, I do. I probably do less of it than I did, say, 5 or 6 years ago. But I do feel like it's important that if you are going to be teaching, if you're going to be educating, whether it's owners, committee members, strata managers, how to live peacefully, successfully, have strong communities, then it's important, I think, that you are actually still at the coalface, still doing, still out there having your hand in the workings of the legal world. I was on a webinar that I was tuning into earlier this week, and I heard a professional describe it as an ethical obligation, a moral obligation, that if you are going to be teaching how, then it's also important that you continue doing. And that really resonated with me. It's not, it was something I've always felt, but haven't been able to articulate in that way. But the short story is, yes, I still do legal work, and that does keep me busy during the week. If you're coming on in, drop me a hello here in the comments. I am here looking at the comments on Facebook. If you're over on LinkedIn or YouTube, drop me a hello as well, and I'll come back around soon to say hi. I can see Cheryl saying hello. Lovely to have you here with us, Cheryl. I have a different screen today, so I think I've hit that button to show you on the screen. Yes, I have. Clever me. Good to have you here with us, Cheryl. Patricia is here saying, hi, Amanda. Welcome, and welcome to you, Patricia. Shah is here giving me a wave, couple of waves. Thank you for joining us, Shah. And Gordon, hi, Amanda, listening from, believe it or not, sunny Coffs Harbour. Yes, so Coffs Harbour, sunny again. That is good. I had my lady who grooms my dogs here 2 days ago in my backyard, and she was telling me that she had cancelled a couple of recently scheduled trips to Coffs Harbour because of the weather, and she was looking forward to getting up there very soon. So good to hear, Gordon, tuning in there from Coffs Harbour. Patricia says it's windy in French's Forest, and Henry says, hi, Amanda. Great to see you, Henry, and lovely to have so many of you coming on in to join me for today's Friday Live. What are we chatting about today? I am going to give a quick nod to this week's podcast episode number 306. I'm going to give you a little bit more background, perhaps, to some of the issues Rena and I were discussing in that episode. I've got a few people in my inbox that has triggered some response, what we discussed in that episode. I also have to share with you a new Strata online information resource that our New South Wales government has put together and has been promoting over the last week or so. You may have seen me post about this on Facebook earlier this week. Like me, you may have emails in your inbox from Fair Trading and other government entities letting you know about this resource. And I thought I'd take some time to take you over and actually show you here on the screen, share my screen with you, what it is that we can find within this information resource, where I think we've got some helpful guidance and where you might be able to rely on that as strata managers, committee members, to help educate your fellow owners. I'm going to share with you the webinar that I have coming up next Thursday and let you know how you can take part in that, and a discussion about a new tribunal appeal panel decision came out last month or so about CCTV. I came across this one and it's touching on a point that we've discussed a couple of times here on live and also on the podcast. So I thought I'd share the details of that case with you and let you know what the tribunal has said about CCTV in our strata schemes in New South Wales and access to CCTV footage. Alrighty. I am just checking in here. I have Christina, who is helping me out in the background. Christina is our newest team member here at Your Strata Property headquarters, and this is the first time that she's been helping out on live. So I'm just checking that she's doing well there. She's sending me a private message, all going well. And more of you coming on in saying hello. Petra is here. Good afternoon, Amanda. I received an email from the government making me aware of the new website. Yep. Pretty good at that. You've got to make sure that you're on those mailing lists, which can help tip us off when we have some new helpful information to be across for Strata. I find that helpful as well. And Anastasia is saying, hi, first time joining, but looking forward to it. Love the podcast. Awesome. So welcome, Anastasia. Thank you for tuning in to Friday Live. And Layla is here saying hello. Good to see you, Layla. Alrighty. So, this week's podcast episode number 306, Rena and I were having a chat about a few things. We were covering off our wins and our challenges as we do every few weeks. And I shared a challenge that was drawn to my attention by a listener. It was about a committee member in that listener's community that was an undischarged bankrupt. So that listener was bankrupt and that was continuing. Sorry, the committee member the listener was telling me about was bankrupt and that bankruptcy was continuing now at the time that this was being drawn to my attention. I talked about it briefly on the podcast, and Christina has the link here for us that she'll pop into the comments. If you haven't had a listen, go and check it out. But I put it on the list to talk about today on live as well, because I had a few of you in my inbox letting me know your views on whether or not our law should allow people who are or have been bankrupt, or perhaps people who have come to the attention of ASIC for the wrong reasons, whether they should be allowed to serve on our committees. A couple of comments on Facebook as well about that. And if you've had a listen to the podcast, you'll hear me say that currently, as a matter of law, there is nothing that prevents people who are bankrupt or have been so from serving on committees. There is no fit and proper person test like we have when lawyers want to be admitted to legal practice. We have to be careful that we don't have any black marks against our name in order to be accepted into the profession. We don't have anything like that for committee members. And Rena and I in the chat on the podcast this week were debating whether, in fact, we should have those requirements. We thought that it might be putting the threshold a little bit too high, raising the bar a little bit too high for volunteer committee members. It's hard enough to get people to put their hand up to serve on our strata committees, and putting more blocks in the way may not be a good idea. I did query whether, if such a requirement was going to be introduced, it might be a requirement for larger buildings, more complex schemes where there are multi-million dollar budgets being administered. Perhaps there may be a higher standard, perhaps there should be a higher standard for the committee members who are in control of the decision making in those communities. But I thought today I'd share a little bit more background to this story that this listener was sharing with me, and that I only very briefly touched on in the podcast episode. Sometimes there's just not enough time to get into all the details. But I wondered if what your views would be, what your thoughts would be on this situation if you had a little bit more information. And I do hold back sometimes information to protect the innocent, or maybe even it protects the guilty sometimes. Change names, change genders on the podcast so that you may not be tipped off as to which building I'm talking about, in case you might be part of it or managing it. But a little bit more background information on this situation of this listener. The bankrupt committee member that I was talking about on the podcast was not actually an owner. So this was a circumstance where an owner had nominated their partner to sit on the committee. And it came to the attention of the listener who was communicating with me that this person was an undischarged bankrupt, and indeed it was their second bankruptcy. So second time they'd gone down that path, not an owner, nominated by an owner to serve on the committee. And apparently this person was also the sole director of a company that was in the hands of liquidators with debts to unsecured creditors of more than $1 million. And there had been a liquidators report that was quite damning, apparently, that referred to insolvent trading. So it is with this knowledge, with this background, that this listener is reaching out to me and saying, Amanda, this is a person who is making decisions about how our owners' corporation funds should be spent. Is there some rule that would prevent this person from making these decisions? Looking deeper into the situation, the listener found out that there were more than 10 companies of which this committee member had previously been a director, and all of them had been deregistered. Most of those deregistrations occurring after liquidation. This person was on the disqualified persons register held by ASIC, and had been slapped with enforceable undertakings by ASIC and fines of more than $20,000. So all of this had happened in the 10 years before this person was nominated by an owner and elected to the committee. So I do sympathize, as much as I express my opinion on the podcast saying we don't have these thresholds, and I'm not sure that we should have them, these requirements of our volunteer committee members. I sympathize with this listener who was doing this research about a committee member that perhaps was making some unpopular decisions in the community, and uncovering this publicly accessible information about how they had previously managed corporate affairs, and failed to meet their duties, their responsibilities as a company director. And I can understand how that would cause some concern, some serious discomfort, and lead someone to start asking those questions. Is there anything that we can do about that? So short answer remains in New South Wales, as I believe it is around the country, but someone will let me know if it's any different. I'd be fascinated to know if there's another jurisdiction around our country that prevents committee members with such histories from serving on committees, but nothing in New South Wales that would stop a person like that from being nominated for and elected to the committee and then managing our owners' corporations' affairs. Alrighty. More of you coming on in and saying hello here to me, and lots of people here live. It's great to see you. If you want to drop me a hello, feel free. It is us today. It is a solo live with me. So we have time to dig a little deeper on some important topics, things I've been working on, things I've been looking at this week, and happy to answer any questions that you have arising from what we're chatting about today. Just post them here on Facebook. If you're on LinkedIn or YouTube, I do come back around and have a look at those questions when I can. Zlata is giving me a hello. Great to see you here today, Zlata. Edward is here. Great to see you, Edward. We have our friend Q Poodle. I don't know who this is, but I like this name. It is cute. I've seen you a few times, Q Poodle, Q Poodle. Good to see you saying hi there. And Gladys is saying, scary to hear. No such safeguards. Yeah, I understand how that's scary, Gladys. And those are the messages that I was getting in my inbox that we've seen in the comments under Facebook. Absolutely, there should be a fit and proper person test. Why don't we have these requirements of our committee members? And I'm hearing that from owners. I'm hearing that from people who are on the ground, who are living in these buildings, who perhaps are suffering maybe firsthand from poor decision making that's going on in their communities. I accept completely that my opinion comes from a place of being a lawyer, Rena's from being a strata manager, and having a different point of view. I'm also an owner on a committee as well, but bringing my lawyer hat to the conversation and having perhaps a different point of view to what owners have when you're struggling in difficult communities with challenging issues. So I can see how so many of you that episode resonated with, and that discussion resonated with you, and you were sympathetic to that listener who is uncovering this uncomfortable information about their committee member. Okay. Now, I have promised you that I would pressure test is the word that I used in my email this afternoon. Pressure test this new online information resource that our New South Wales government has put together for strata owners, for strata managers, for committee members, for people who are thinking about buying into strata and have some questions. I am indeed going to take you over to have a look at that web page. It's actually a number of different web pages. And at first I think I was incorrectly referring to this earlier this week as a resource produced by New South Wales Fair Trading. Not Fair Trading, New South Wales Government. It is a .nsw.gov.au website. Previously taking the limited information, I think it's fair to say, and not controversial to say, limited information that we had on our New South Wales Fair Trading website, and putting it within the New South Wales Government website. And there's a lot there, a lot more to share, a lot to get value from if you are looking for some basic. It is basic, but there's a lot of it. Basic information about strata living in New South Wales. So I'm going to take you over to that page. Christina has very helpfully posted the link already in the comments here on Facebook. So I will share my screen with you, but you can jump over and have a look directly there as well. Whether you are already living in strata, you're on the committee, you're managing strata, you're looking to buy, the idea with these web pages is that it should have information that will answer your strata questions quickly. There was some public consultation, definitely has been quite a bit of public consultation in New South Wales as we look at building our strata hub and also reviewing our New South Wales legislation. And the feedback from that consultation has been that people want more information, more access to information, accurate information. There is a section about strata committees and a who's who in strata. What is a strata committee? What's an owners corporation? What is a strata manager, and how do I contact them? That was flagged as one of the number one things that people wanted to know, roles and responsibilities. It has been reported that there was an average of 20,000 monthly visitors to the New South Wales Fair Trading website looking for strata information. So there was a real need for that information to be more accessible, a little more detailed, for there to be an easier way to get questions answered. So herein lies the result of this consultation and this suite of web pages that has been put together by the New South Wales government. I am going to share my screen with you and take you on over to the relevant web page. Now, okay, that is looking like it is sharing there to you. If you're on a mobile, that might be a little bit small, but do come back and check out the replay when you're at your desktop. The web address is nsw.gov.au/housing and property /strata. So you probably want to pick up that link written down in the comments here or under this video where you are watching it. Advice for living in or buying into a strata community. As a member of a strata community, you own an individual lot, and owners decide collectively how to best manage the property they share. This is the homepage, and then there are links to find out all different aspects of strata living. We're going to have a little poke around a few of those. I just wanted to take you down a little bit further where the page is reminding our New South Wales owners corporations that from the 30th of June this year, this is creeping up on us, owners corporations will need to provide information annually so that this online tool that the government is building can be kept up to date. So this is our mandatory annual reporting. I was talking about this earlier this year. I'll come back around and post the link to the podcast episode where I was talking about mandatory annual reporting for owners corporations. That is happening from the 30th of June this year. And I'll show you, this is a good example here. I'll show you uh, how this information is going to be used once the mandatory reporting system is in full swing. So we have just a little snapshot of it here on this search function. Already live, already going here on this part of the website. We can type an address or a strata plan number and get some limited, at this point in time, information about that strata plan. I'll type one that I am familiar with and I'll show you what comes up. So this is strata plan number 13385 and it gives you the address of the strata building. It tells you how many lots are there and when the plan was registered. That's all we can get at the moment. But once we have our mandatory annual reporting and our owners corporations are answering that long list of questions, filling out that long online form that I have talked about previously, and I'll let you know where to get that podcast episode, then there's going to be a lot more information here to access about a building. So you can search by strata plan number or address. Helpful if you've got an address and you want to know what the strata plan number is or vice versa. You can see that information is available. Just be careful with your address searches that you know the actual address. I was doing this earlier today and I had to be careful that I put in this range of address of street numbers to be able to get the actual strata plan number here. So if I had just typed 37, I got no result. So if you're looking for strata plan numbers, just be aware that it may have a different street address. So that's clever. And that we're starting to see now how we are going to be putting the information obtained through the mandatory annual report into use in our online system. Okay, so let's have a closer look here about the things we might be able to learn when we hit this website. A few different ways to navigate. There's our links up the top here, text links, and then also some information, a swipe through information option here. Serving on the strata committee, how to run a strata meeting, repairs and maintenance. This is interesting. Trending topics. I'm not quite sure how the website measures what's trending. Popular pages, I suppose. But this may be a place to go if you are wondering, maybe as a strata manager, as a strata service provider, what are the hot topics that people are interested in that they're searching for on this website. And that may then direct you, as I would like to see it direct me with the content that I produce and the education that I produce. If a lot of people are asking, what's a strata role? Great topic for a podcast. I am just keeping my eye on some comments coming through as well. I can see your comment there, Henry. I might come back to that one. Michael is saying, also helpful is the way of going to newsouthwaleslrs.com.au, which has a map, and clicking on the property, as some properties have 2 or more addresses, range of numbers, or different street names used. Yes, great tip. Thank you very much, Michael, for that. Sometimes we're just trying to find out a strata plan number. We want to find out who the strata manager is, what the address for service is. A couple of free avenues for working that out in New South Wales, which is good. Okay, so if we have hit this page and let's say we want to find out about strata meetings, we can click through here. Try and do this in a way that I can come back to this if I need to. Strata meetings, learn about the different types of meetings, including annual general meetings and strata committee commenting meetings. There we go. We have our first typo. That's okay. That happens to the best of us. Strata committee meetings and why you should get involved. An incredible amount of work. Incredible amount of work has gone into these web pages. I certainly haven't read every page, but I have dipped into a few, and there is some detail here. It's basic stuff, but there is an attempt to cover most aspects of what people will be experiencing in strata. You can see we have key information. Every now and then there's a little snippet of a fun fact popping up here on each page, which is interesting. Why should I attend meetings? Topics that meetings can cover, the different kinds of meetings. So this is really, if you're a strata manager and you have someone who is new to strata, perhaps you have a right sizer, as our friend Sam Rees from Australian Apartment Advocacy would call it, not a downsizer, a right sizer, someone who's come from a freestanding home, a larger home, moved to strata, has no idea, but would like to do their own research about exactly what is involved in strata living. I think this is a really good place to be directing them to have a poke around. Pre-meeting voting, proxy voting, getting a little bit more detailed there. Tenants at meetings, perhaps a good place to direct tenants who are asking questions about strata. If they are. I was talking to a strata manager today for the podcast, which you'll see come up in a few weeks' time, this interview being published. And she said her introduction to strata was being a tenant in strata. She was there for 10 years and she never heard the word strata. She was a tenant for 10 years and never actually heard anyone use that term strata. So many of our tenants are unaware of this structure that's happening behind the scenes. How voting works, voting power, types of votes, referring here to general resolutions, special resolutions, unanimous. I've just noticed that says general resolution. We would probably say ordinary resolution. A sustainability infrastructure resolution, a unanimous resolution. Raising matters for discussion. And then popular pages, once again, telling us where most people are going to look for their strata information. Lots of cross-linking here happening on the page as well, which keeps people learning, keeps people engaged in learning more. I'm just going to head back here to a particular section that caught my eye when I first looked at this the other day. I can't see it here now, but I think I have a copy. Here it is, up here. There is a section on strata abandoned goods, what to do if something has been left behind or dumped. Caught my attention because a couple of years ago, I think it is now, these sections in our New South Wales legislation, strata legislation, that referred directly to uncollected or abandoned goods, including abandoned motor vehicles, those sections were repealed without any notice, as far as I could see, to anybody. They were repealed. I think we were in the middle of COVID, first lockdown, so I'm thinking it was 2020. And these were the sections that allowed an owner's corporation to put a notice, a written notice on a vehicle or on abandoned goods left on the common property. Leave the notice there for at least 5 days, and then if the goods were not moved, then the owner's corporation could move them, and for the purpose of that exercise, the owner's corporation was taken to be the owner of the goods, so there was no concerns about trespass or any illegal act in moving those goods. Those sections of our legislation, and there were some regulations supporting those, disappeared a couple of years ago. And now everything is dealt with under the Uncollected Goods Act in New South Wales. And it's something I've been asked about. Not sure if I've ever mentioned it on the podcast. I know I've mentioned it in our members Q&A forum, but I haven't had a close look at the Uncollected Goods Act and haven't really worked through how that would apply to abandoned goods in our strata schemes. But guess what? New South Wales government and the good lawyers advising New South Wales government have done that for us here on this page. And I've had a read of this and I think it's pretty good. I think it's a pretty good summary of how the Uncollected Goods Act works when we're dealing with the disposal of abandoned goods in strata. So it goes through some examples of if there's rubbish, food, or plants left on the common property, no notice is required. You can dispose of the material in any appropriate manner. If there are personal documents left, you have to wait at least 28 days. Then you can securely destroy personal documents. What are personal documents? And then we have this tiered approach depending on the value of the goods. Value is less than $1,000. Notify the owner of the goods in writing or verbally and wait 14 days, then dispose of it. Value between $1,000 and $20,000, notify the owner of the goods in writing and wait at least 28 days. If they do not retrieve their property, you can dispose of it via a public auction or private sale for fair value. Now, I've gone over and had a look at the Uncollected Goods Act, and that is what it says: dispose by public auction or private sale. It doesn't say you can just chuck it out, just dispose, full stop, which I think is a problem. Who is going to be facilitating these public auctions or private sales for something that may be worth just over $1,000? Probably not worth it to the owner's corporation to go to that trouble. And on my reading of the Uncollected Goods Act, there isn't otherwise an avenue to dispose of goods without going through this sale process, which I think is a little bit unusual. So I think this summary is a good one, and the law is clear. As for whether it is helpful for our owners' corporations, that's another thing. We're having to wait at least 28 days. That's a long time. It's a long time. It's a long way from the 5 days that we were having to wait under our former specific legislation that was drafted for strata schemes. Property valued over 20,000, you have to get an order from NCAT. The order will tell you how to notify the owner, how long to wait for a reply, and what method of disposal is appropriate. And it deals with cars. Here's our summary about cars. Apologies, I've had a bit of a cold, so I'm sorry to be coughing on you. Abandoned cars. You can only get rid of an abandoned car or other vehicle if you have proof that it's not stolen. You need a certificate from the Commissioner of Police and a written search result from the Personal Property Securities Register. Once you've got that, then you follow the rules for uncollected goods. So what's the value of the car? If it's over 20,000, you need to get your order. If it's between 1,000 and 20,000, then you need to notify the owner, wait 28 days, and then you can sell it. You can sell it. So I don't know that abandoned cars are all that common in our strata schemes. I do know that cars that are parked maybe for a few days and then disappear, some recalcitrant parkers who are constantly parking in the visitor parking or in areas of the common property that they shouldn't be. I know that they are a problem. If abandoned cars are a problem and you are able to prove that the car is not stolen, then it can be helpful to understand how this process works. Goes on to tell you what should be in a disposal notice, what can't be disposed of, lost or abandoned pets. I didn't read that earlier. No, yes, let's not dispose of lost or abandoned pets. Let's take them to the local vet and check their microchip and see if we can find their owners. Have a look through here. I'm seeing some questions come through, and I'm going to, or comments. I'm going to head over there in just a moment. This was one of the few pages I have read closely, and I think is helpful because this has been a little bit of a grey area since we've had those sections of our legislation repealed, our strata legislation repealed in New South Wales. And someone has done the work of going and having a close look at the Uncollected Goods Act and summarising it here for us. Alrighty. Sean is saying good afternoon. Late getting here. Better late than never, Sean. Good to see you here. Layla is saying, what if the goods are dumped and you don't know who dumped them? Yeah, good question, because we're being told to notify, aren't we? Notify the owner of the goods. Don't know the answer to that one, Layla. There may be something in the Uncollected Goods Act about whether or not you can, what to do if you can't identify the owner of the goods. Not there in our common questions. I will have a look for you. I will have a look and come back to answer that one for you when I have an answer. Good question. Uh, Sean is saying sell them for 10 cents. Yeah. Yeah, I suppose so. Sell them to a committee member, sell them to strata manager, sell them to somebody who's willing to say, it's been sold and therefore we complied with the Uncollected Goods Act. Yeah, maybe that's the answer. Patricia is saying maybe the typos on the web indicate changes to the terminology that may be included in the pending Amendment Act. Maybe that's interesting. I can't remember where I saw it. Where did I see that typo, Patricia? Up here? No, I've gone back now. Can't remember what the typo was. Oh, you think we might be tipped off to some changes to come, perhaps. Cheryl is saying, what if owner's rubbish packages has their name on it and the owner denies it's theirs? This happened 12 months ago. Interesting, Cheryl. They denied that it was theirs. So what happened next? Did they think somebody had stolen their identity? Perhaps. Yeah, good question. I'd say there's a definition in our Uncollected Goods Act about the owner of goods, and yes, I would imagine that would be an unusual situation where somebody would deny that something with their name on it was theirs. No doubt you were asking them to comply with a bylaw or to better manage their waste or to deal with their rubbish. So they thought that the better option was a position of denial. Not very neighbourly, that's for sure. Layla is saying we had someone not living in the property leave their car in our visitor spot while they went overseas for 3 months. Yeah. Not living in the property left their car. So you knew who it was. Not a stolen car, abandoned, not legally parked. If you could get that certificate from the police to say it's not stolen, then you could use the provisions in this act to sell the car. You'd have to let them know. And it would be important to have a close look at the Uncollected Goods Act to see what happens if you issue a notice and you get a response. If you issue a notice to the owner saying this is what we're going to do and you get a response, you're probably going to be prevented or at least delayed in your process of selling that car, if that's what it is, by public auction. Patricia is saying we write to all owners and tenants seeking who is the owner of goods. Yep. Good plan there to be asking. And Layla is just filling me in further. I called the police. They called the registered owner who left his phone with his friend. Yeah. It's always a story. The things we have to put up with in strata. Henry, in relation to vehicles, could you have them towed and pass the responsibility to a towing company? Great question. Answer is, in New South Wales, no. I get asked that a lot. No, you have to be very careful not to interfere with someone else's property unless you have followed the procedure now set out in the Uncollected Goods Act, or the Uncollected Goods Act is an act from the 1950s or 60s, I think. So it's been around for a while, but now this is the act that we have to follow in strata since we've had those other sections of our strata legislation in New South Wales repealed. I know, Henry, you are not in New South Wales, so maybe it is different in Victoria. I think it's a little bit borderline in Western Australia. I had a member in our community in one of our 1 hour member calls ask me a question about Western Australian law about towing vehicles, and it was a little more flexible over there. I found that was a couple of years ago. I was looking at that, but in New South Wales, do not go towing vehicles from the common property just because it's on the common property, just because maybe it's even on lot property where it shouldn't be. It doesn't give you, surprisingly, the right to immediately interfere with that vehicle or those abandoned goods. You do need to be following that process, long, painful process that is set out in the Uncollected Goods Act. Layla saying it was removed pretty quick after they got the police call. Yeah, I like that, because you and if there's no response, then you have the right to then sell that car. So yeah, a little bit scary and worth relaying that information to get a quick result. So that was one of our pages. We went deep there. That was one of our pages on our new New South Wales Government information website, various web pages here about strata living. There was something else that I wanted to show you. I'm just heading back to my notes. Who's who? I think it was the who's who section. Who's who in strata understand the roles of the owners corporation and strata committee, strata manager, and building manager. So another good place to be directing new owners who may not know very much about strata. Here's another fun fact. More than 3,500 people in New South Wales are employed directly by strata schemes. Owners Corporation, previously called a body corporate, made up of all the owners in a strata scheme. The Owners Corporation makes decisions and manages the overall scheme. There's a reason I wanted to show you this page, because where we talk about, here it is, where we talk about a strata committee, this is something to be careful of. This information is helpful. It is, however, very basic and quite high level, let's say, high level. And be aware that directing people to this information may, in some cases, give rise to more questions and the need to go deeper. And I see this here in this page about what is a strata committee and what decisions can the strata committee make. Under this heading, what decisions can the strata committee make, it says a strata committee helps the owners corporation make decisions about the strata scheme. The owners corporation chooses exactly what the strata committee can decide on. That is actually not the case. It works the other way around. Our strata committees can make decisions about anything that is not otherwise restricted to the owners corporation. So our strata committees have very, very broad, far-reaching, important powers. A strata committee can make a decision about whether an item of common property should be repaired and maintained, and they can send contractors out to start doing that work. It is more correct, in my view, to approach the difference between a strata committee and an owners corporation by looking at what a strata committee cannot make decisions about. It cannot pass special resolutions, for example. What needs a special resolution? A bylaw. A bylaw needs a special resolution. It cannot appoint a strata manager. That must be done by the owners corporation. It cannot strike levies. That must be done by an owners corporation. But when you start to look at it, there are not too many things on this list that a strata committee can't do. And while an owners corporation can restrict a strata committee's decision making by passing a resolution at a general meeting to say the following matters are limited to the owners corporation to decide on and not the strata committee, it is not the case that the owners corporation chooses exactly what the committee can decide on, which is what this website says. So there's a few areas there that it's a little bit high level, and I think we just need to approach those high level summaries with a little bit of caution, because this is what leads owners into a misunderstanding of the power of their strata committees And owners can be incredibly surprised when things are happening around the building that they have no knowledge of, feel that they've never approved, and have a sense that they should have knowledge of it and should have had a say in whether or not, for example, the roof membrane was to be repaired or replaced. But the fact is, a strata committee, depending on budgets and whether you're a large scheme and whether you've got the money in the account, a strata committee can make those decisions without going to a general meeting. So overall helpful information, but high level, and there will be no doubt with it for an owner that is experiencing a problem, or there's a dispute, or there's some conflict, or they're looking for a specific answer. They may not find that answer within these pages and may have to go a little bit deeper, but definitely a good starting point. Alrighty, I am going to stop sharing that screen there now. We do have the link to this page. Do have a poke around. Strata managers absolutely have this in your toolkit to share, especially with new owners. I think many strata managers I've come across have a pack that they send out, or at least a form to get contact information for new owners to get addresses for service. Might be a good idea to put this link to this information as part of that pack so that new owners can go and have a read and gain some understanding of exactly what it is strata is and the basic knowledge to help them ease into strata living. One of the questions that was coming up, I think it was here on the Facebook page when I posted last week this new resource. A question was, this is great. I wonder if all of this is connected to the review of our strata schemes legislation in New South Wales. And by the way, what's happening with that? When are we getting new legislation? And Patricia, you've hinted at this as well, that you're aware that that's going on in the background. The statutory review of the New South Wales strata legislation, we started talking about this a couple of years ago. It is required to, the review is required by law to take place within 5 years of our Strata Schemes Management Act commencing. It commenced on the 30th of November 2016. So we started talking about this in 2020, a discussion paper in 2021. I don't think it's called a discussion paper, actually. I think it is a report. Yes, a report on the statutory review of the Strata Schemes Development Act and Strata Schemes Management Act. The answer to the question, where is it all at? That's where it's at. We have a 112-page report that has collated these submissions that many owners, stakeholders, representatives made last year. I think we have, yes, we do. Christina's already popped it in for us, a link to the report on the statutory review. Go have a look at that if you missed it. It came out in November last year when we were all kind of getting back out into the world, so you may have missed it. And the website, the Fair Trading's website that updates us on what's happening with the review, says that there will be new draft legislation in 2022, sometime in 2022. So often I have people tuning in here to live, whether you're a strata manager, a lawyer, someone in the loop who may have some more information directly from government that is a little clearer about that and what dates we might expect to see some draft legislation. If you do have that or you do know where to find it, please do post it here in the comments, because I've had more than two people asking where that review is at. Have a look at the report. There's a lot of recommendations there, and a few tips as to where we think what we think the new or the amendments to the New South Wales strata legislation might cover. Okay, two more things before we are wrapping up today. One is a webinar and the other is a case from our New South Wales appeal panel of the tribunal about CCTV recordings and access to CCTV records. So hang on there for that one. It's an interesting one. But first of all, a webinar next Thursday, the 7th of April. I will be live online once again, this time for Lane Cove and Hunters Hill councils in Sydney. We are kicking off at midday via Zoom webinar next Thursday, the 7th of April. That is Eastern Standard Time. It will be next week. Daylight saving ends this weekend. Reminder, everybody, extra hour. I'd love to see you online for this webinar. We are learning how to combat bad behavior in our apartments and how to restore peace to our communities. And a big part, the central part of achieving that, I say, is more effectively using bylaws. So, this is what I call my bylaws webinar, teaching you how to harness the power of bylaws. And it is an immense power that our owners have, our committees, our owners' corporations, the power to regulate others in their community, the power to set enforceable rules about how people should behave, what they can and can't do. And if we're smart about the way that we use bylaws, then we really can use them to improve our communities. So I will be working through on next Thursday's webinar the process for implementing great bylaws, what it is that makes a great bylaw, what we want to avoid in our bylaws, which bylaws have been declared by our New South Wales Tribunal to be harsh, unconscionable, or oppressive, and therefore invalid. We want to make sure we avoid those and not put too much time and effort into producing harsh, unconscionable, or oppressive bylaws. I always give you an update on these webinars as to the recent cases on point about bylaws. And I know many of you have been attending my bylaws webinars for a few years now, and you always tell me that there is something new to learn. So the webinar is for free, but you do need to be registered to get your Zoom access link, and you can do that over at yourstrataproperty.com.au/webinar. My thanks to Lane Cove and Hunters Hill councils for facilitating this one. I'd love to see as many of you as possible online for next Thursday's webinar. Just seeing, I think, Patricia, your question or your comment, have you ever been invited to arrange a webinar for bylaws with the Northern Beaches Council? Northern Beaches Council? No, I haven't, Patricia. I am partway through a project with the Northern Sydney region. I'm not sure. I'm smiling because I'm not sure our Northern Beaches are included in that one. I'll have to go back and have a look and see if they're on my list of webinars. But the best way to find out when I might be covering your council area, when the next webinars are, is to make sure that you are on our email mailing list. If you head over to yourstrataproperty.com.au, and you can see a few ways to sign up to our list. Grab yourself one of the free ebooks. You can sign up to our list, and you will be sure to be informed when our webinars are happening. Even if you're not in that local council area, here's a great question here from Cheryl. Will the webinar apply to all Sydney LGAs? Yes, absolutely. There is, on these webinars, there's always a special offer for those who are residents in the local council area that is hosting the webinar. So Cheryl, if you haven't been on one of those webinars before, definitely tune into this one. All of the information is relevant to anyone right across the state and even interstate as well. There are definitely general principles of strata that we strata living body corporates that we cover in these webinars, so well worth joining in. And when you hear the special offer for the local council area, you'll hear me invite others who are not part of that local council area to reach out to me and see if I may have previously made that offer to your council area, and you might be able to snap up the goodie that's going to be on offer there. So best thing you can do is get registered for the webinar, so you get all of the details about that. yourstrataproperty.com.au/webinar. Always good to see your familiar names, if not faces, online on my webinars. Looking forward to that one next Thursday. Alrighty, this CCTV case. Appeal panel decision. We have a link here, case name, and a link here for you that Christina will pop into the comments. I'm going to do my best to mangle this case name. Benoit de Tal. Benoit et al. And the Owners Corporation of Strata Plan 576 appeal panel decision, published in March, but I think the hearing must have been in February. Once again, I'm actually going to take you over to my other screen where I can share with you some highlighted excerpts from this case. I've already mentioned a few times that it is about CCTV, and I'm bringing it to you because we've talked about this a few times on the podcast, here on live. What are the rules about CCTV in our strata schemes? Most pressingly, or the question I get a lot is, can we access, as owners, can we access the footage from the CCTV? Is it a record of the Owners Corporation? And if it is, how long does that record have to be held? How long does it have to be kept by the Owners Corporation? Is it 5 years? Is it 7 years? If it is years, how is that facilitated by an Owners Corporation? How is that stored? This is a lot of data. If we have to keep it for 7 years, how do we store it? So this case answers a couple of those questions. It is an appeal panel case. So the tribunal below, a single member of the tribunal, had made a decision about access to certain records, including access to CCTV records. And the owner on the other end of that decision was unhappy with part of it and appealed part of it to the appeal panel. And that's what you're seeing here in this written decision here of the appeal panel. You can see it on your screen, but we've got a link in the comments as well where you can go and get your own copy. I have highlighted a few sections of this case that I'm going to take you through quickly, but do feel free to go and read it all. It's not too long. Each party, the appellant owner and also the respondent owners corporation, were self-represented. So there were no lawyers involved in these proceedings, and a strata committee member represented the owners corporation. I will just scroll down to our first highlight here, which lets you know what happened in the tribunal below. So before, the single member of the tribunal, before there was an appeal, the tribunal made orders that the owners corporation should make available to the lot owner certain documents. And those documents included a levy register, documents where the owners corporation had obtained legal advice, any list of documents about a particular lot owner, action that was taken about the behavior of a particular lot owner, an email from the strata manager sent to the strata committee. Those orders were made. So the lot owner had said, I've asked for this material. The owners corporation has wrongfully withheld it. That's what section 188 is all about, the wrongful withholding of owners corporation records. And the tribunal said, yep, I find there's been a wrongful withholding and these documents should be made available to the owner. I will make an order that happens. But if you can see there in subparagraph 2 here, the application is otherwise dismissed. So the appeal panel goes on to say, no part of Order 1 is appealed against. It's the dismissal of the appellant's application for access to CCTV footage which gives rise to the appeal. So what we understand from reading that is that the lot owner had also asked for another order about access to CCTV footage. And you'll see the words there, both retrospectively and prospectively. So the lot owner had said, I want access to certain footage of events that have already happened. And I also want an order that's telling the owners corporation, if I ever ask in future for access to footage, then they have to. They have to give me that access. That's what the prospective application for access was all about, or the prospective access. So the lot owner said to the appeal panel, well, the tribunal addressed my requests for other things, but it didn't deal with my application for access to CCTV. I think that was wrong, and I think that should be revisited. That's my rather broad brush summary. You can see there's a lot more words here that fill that in a little bit more for you. Now, the tribunal had indeed thought about the CCTV issue, but found that the CCTV footage sought to be accessed no longer existed because it is overwritten after 6 weeks. And the tribunal said, having considered the available evidence and the submissions of the parties, the tribunal is not satisfied that any of the footage exists. And so there's no utility in making an order for the production of records that do not exist. I find myself saying exactly these words to owners regularly when they say to me, Amanda, I want access to this record, or I believe I should have access to this record. And I say a big part of being successful in such an application is being able to prove, first of all, that such a record exists, because it is very easy for the owners corporation to say, well, we don't have it. It's not in our custody and control. And if it's not in the owners corporation's custody and control, then they don't have to produce it. So in this case, the owners corporation had said, we overwrite our CCTV footage after 6 weeks, so we do not have what this owner is looking for. And the tribunal accepted that and said, well, I can't make an order for access to something that doesn't exist. Now, some of you clever cookies there might be attuned to the next issue, which is, CCTV footage overwritten after 6 weeks. Is that legal? Should an owners corporation be keeping their CCTV footage for a longer period so that it can be accessed by owners and we don't have this excuse that the footage does not exist? Now, I've just highlighted, we're going to get to that answer, but I've just highlighted this part of the decision here that refers to an entitlement only to inspect existing documents, which is what I was just speaking to. There was an order sought by the appellant that he could view the CCTV footage at any time into the future, and the tribunal said, we're not going to make that order. Your entitlement is to inspect existing documents only, not documents that might exist into the future. Okay, so the tribunal had recorded that this building actually had a policy that CCTV footage would not be made available unless there had been a formal request from Strata or New South Wales Police, or I think that's AFP, unless one of those requests is received. The tribunal had said that such a policy appears reasonable, reflects legitimate privacy concerns, and seems directed towards the use of CCTV footage to detect illegal activity and not provide potential support for lesser reasons such as a personal vendetta. That's the tribunal saying that. The member at first instance. I find that surprising. The appeal panel didn't have to get into whether or not that finding was correct, but I find it. But the appeal panel did make a comment later on, which I'm going to get to, which tells me that the appeal panel doesn't necessarily agree with that approach and believes that CCTV footage is a record of the owners corporation and should be provided even outside of those specific circumstances, whether or not it's requested by the police, whether it's about detecting illegal activity. And it's not for the owners corporation and by extension the tribunal to look into, to consider what the purpose of the inspection might be. That's certainly clear on the face of our legislation, that an owner does not have to explain why they want access to a record. If it's a record, if it exists, if it's in the custody and control of the owners corporation, then it should be accessible. So I just wanted to point out there that this policy, while recorded here as the tribunal had looked at this policy, from my point of view, it's not a policy that I would be encouraging owners corporations to put in place. I definitely think you need rules around how your CCTV operates and how access to those records are granted. But I'm not sure limiting access in this way is such a good idea. So I'll just move down a little bit quicker here to some of our findings of our appeal panel in this case. This is where I have found the appeal panel makes a conclusion about CCTV being a record of the owners corporation. So the appellant submits that at the time the owners corporation resolved to install the cameras, it also by implication resolved that all CCTV footage thereby created was a record of the owners corporation, and further that it should be retained for 7 years. We accept, says the appeal panel, that any CCTV footage so created can be categorized as a record of the owner's corporation. So that's really important. You're going to have lawyers like me trot out that sentence if ever we have clients who are seeking access to CCTV and saying it's a record of the owner's corporation. On my reading of this decision, that's the appeal panel saying, yes, CCTV footage can be categorized as a record of the owner's corporation. Forget policies about it can only be accessed by certain people in certain circumstances. If it's a record of the owner's corporation, then an owner or their authorized representative can access it. I'm just seeing your message there, Cheryl, saying thank you. Love spending time sharing such valuable information. Enjoy your weekend. Yeah, I'm running over time. I'm excited about everything we've been sharing today. We will be wrapping up shortly. Yes, so record of the owner's corporation can be accessed. However, the appeal panel rejected the proposition that the footage is a record of the kind specified in Section 180. In other words, there's no requirement that the footage be retained for 7 years. So Section 180 refers to specific records that must be retained for 7 years. Whether by oversight or by design, it does not refer to CCTV footage. So the case this owner's corporation made was, well, CCTV footage is not referred to in Section 180. There are specific documents in 180. Those must be kept for 7 years. There is no minimum time period that an owner's corporation has to keep CCTV. If there was, it would be set out in the legislation. And this is, as I understand it, the first decision, reported decision, where the tribunal, certainly the appeal panel, has considered that issue and delivered this finding on that issue. There is no requirement in the Act that CCTV footage be retained for 7 years. And so the argument that destroying it after 6 weeks was wrongful failed before the appeal panel. This is something we have discussed, as I've said, here on live and also on the podcast. I had a chat with Chris Irons from Queensland about the issue of CCTV, and we published that chat, I believe, as podcast episode number 291. And we were both talking about keeping records of CCTV, and we had mentioned a 7-year requirement. And there were some emails back and forth that I received from some owners who had considered this same question, challenging that conclusion that Chris and I had come to. And when I published podcast episode number 291, I referred to some of that and some of this legislation and saying that this was an area that wasn't quite clear and may not, in fact, require 7 years that the footage needs to be kept. So here we have, a few months after that chat, here we have a finding of our appeal panel saying that footage does not have to be retained for 7 years. This is important. It is really a matter for the owner's corporation to resolve this issue, and it's not without complexity having regard to statutory provisions. So my view is that this is the tribunal directing owners corporations to say, hey, probably put in place a bylaw that helps you deal with your CCTV and answers these questions and makes clear to owners how long it is that you're going to be retaining footage. So we don't have these debates, we don't have this confusion. Everything is upfront in a registered bylaw. And that's definitely what my recommendation to owners corporations has been. I think that's all I have highlighted here for you in this case. In these comments here on Facebook, we have the link to the case for you. Important one to go and check out if you have questions about CCTV, about access to records. Interesting one to consider, I thought, and thank you for the indulgence of allowing me to work through that with you here today. Gordon's also letting me know to have a great weekend. He's on his way. It has been lovely to spend this afternoon with you. I'm going to take a breath now, have a drink of water, maybe have something a bit stronger on a Friday night. I hope you are going to enjoy your evening, enjoy your weekend too. Thank you for spending time with me. If you have liked what you've heard, if you have learned something today, if you think there are others in your community, on your committee, your neighbors, your clients, if you're a strata manager who would learn from what we've shared today, please do feel free to share this video, to tag your friends and colleagues colleagues and relatives in it to give us a tick, give us a like, a love heart, sends all those good Facebook juices flowing so we can reach as many people as possible and help as many people as possible in this fun, challenging, ever-changing, exciting world that is strata living. Enjoy your weekend, everyone. I hope to see you on our webinar next Thursday, and I'll catch you on a Friday Live again sometime soon. Bye-bye.